Hello everyone, JesterGio here. Welcome back to Brewing Thoughts. In today's video, we will be going over the balance changes that will be happening at the end of the season. There are a lot of changes to go through, some good and some mid. However, before we get started, a couple of things I wanted to say. First, the mini-map has been reverted back to the old system and I think it'll stay like that. This kinda sucks, as I really like the mini-map functionality on both factions. However, while they did remove the mini-map, they did keep the radar changes and map feature. These are still really good changes as it allows players to get a better view of terrain around the map while also giving us a much more responsive radar. This allows both factions to see and keep track of each other much more smoothly, so while the mini-map removal is kinda sad, I'm really happy the other changes are still intact. Second, I wanted to cover all the miscellaneous changes they made to the game before getting into the actual balance changes. For starters, Warp got an initial cooldown nerf, being increased from 40 seconds to 50 seconds. Seeing how absurd Warp is as both a teleport and blink alternative, I think the initial cooldown nerf makes sense, especially from what we've seen from it. During KOA 7, Patient and Opera on 4th stop was by far one of the most memorable battles in IDV, and Warp now makes it so Patient is on the losing end. You all may disagree and say it's hard to use, but I personally don't think so. If you have trouble with depth perception, I can understand why it can be a challenge, however Warp becomes a very easy trait to use once you get the hang of it. When you know how and when to use it, it is actually insane just how much value you get with this one trait, so the nerf feels very warranted. The range and the cooldown afterwards hasn't been nerfed as well, so I think it's still gonna be possibly the strongest trait in the game right now. Embalmer got a slight coffin nerf when going against Ivy, now corruption will still generate even when he's in his invincible state from rebirth. I don't see the point of this change, specifically because I feel like Ivy hard counters Embalmer and this only serves to make him weaker. Even in tourney, we can see Embalmer struggles a lot against Ivy and he has zero rebound potential thanks to the Doritos. But moving on, they also changed button things for PC and mobile while also overhauling Hunter hitboxes. The last part is self-explanatory, they changed the hitboxes to be more consistent, even with lag, but I'm just as stumped on the button thing. I'm just gonna guess it means button inputs are more consistent and avoid the headache. The last notable change they did was make it so if you're hit by the hunter while walking or crouching, it'll force you to swap to run automatically. This is an amazing change that makes it so you don't waste your damage boost fumbling to run again while also putting less hassle on the player. Overall, these are all really good changes made to the game and I'm happy with all the changes minus the Embalmer one. Finally, as shown in the miscellaneous section, there will be a lot of discussing going on with the balance changes. Some won't be too in-depth such as the cowboy or the acrobat changes, but there will be a lot of discussion going on based on the change and the reception they got. I have a lot to say on certain characters and debunk certain opinions, so without further ado, let's get into the nerfs. Let's start with the one who I feel won't be impacted as much by the nerfs, and are you really surprised at this point as to who it is? Opera Singer's attack and charged attack backswing got nerfed, which will make it slightly easier to make distance after she misses. However, the biggest nerf people seem to be commenting on is the speed loss when Opera reaches max presence. Basically, full presence dash will have the same speed as zero presence dash, meaning you will still go farther, just not as fast. I've been seeing a lot of people saying Opera Singer is no longer meta with this change, and even my friend Wendigo X thinks she'll be a TIE hunter after the changes. While I do respect all of those opinions, especially those made by Wendy, I just do not believe that Opera Singer is a TIE hunter now. Let me ask you a question, why is Opera Singer the best hunter in the first place? Is it because of her recall ability being so strong? Is it because her final presence is that busted? No, it's because Opera Singer has one of the best zero presence abilities in the game and it isn't even close. Opera Singer essentially has a mobility and rushdown ability that never goes on cooldown unless she messes up. She is also extremely fast, even in her presence zero state. People might say she's not as fast and she's not as good because of this, but I think that's mainly due to player skill. Opera Singer is a hard hunter to get the grasp of, however she can be a monster if you are good enough to use her. Currently, the strongest Opera Singer players that come to my head are Peter and Pepe. Take a look at their gameplay and what Opera can do. Just a reminder, this is Presence 0 Opera, she is at Presence 0 and she is moving insanely quickly. Final Presence was definitely scary, and it being nerfed will definitely make Opera weaker, but it's not the reason Opera is the best hunter in the game. I can definitely feel NetEase suffering from the Bloody Queen effect, where they just simply don't know how to nerf her anymore and it's not their fault. Opera Singer is fundamentally a broken character thanks to Presence 0 and I can only see 3 ways she becomes a TIE hunter. They either need to nerf her to the ground and gut her, buff and release new survivors specifically to counter her, or release newer hunters who are far stronger than her. It's kinda sad that Goatman is coming out soon and all people want to know is if he's stronger than Opera. Overall, I'm happy NetEase is still trying to address Opera, but I don't think this nerf will kill her like people are saying it will. I think she'll be played a bit less in tourney and a lot less in rank and that'll be it. What I can't say the same for, however, is Ivy, who got nerfed hard in this patch. Ivy's Final Presence Dorito Blast got its cooldown nerfed, possibly in response to Insolence Ivy. The tourney footage we saw of Insolence Ivy was a force to be reckoned with and it made winning matches next to impossible against a good Ivy. Insolence also made it so you got to max presence way faster, allowing you to abuse this ability a lot more. Because of these factors, it got nerfed again, however I don't think this is what hurt Ivy the most. What hurt Ivy the most is the changes they made to Yeek and the Doritos when you have someone eliminated. Yeek got its based movement speed reduced from 8.44 to 7.59, making him much slower than before. As for the Dorito change, now if a survivor is eliminated from the trial, the Dorito time before it can be eaten is reduced from 20 seconds to 12 seconds and the time it takes to eat the Dorito also decreases from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. Unlike Opera Singer, who I feel the nerfs won't affect her at all, I do think these nerfs will greatly impact Ivy and her gameplay. By far the strongest aspect about Ivy is the fact that she can defend objectives such as gates and ciphers really effectively. Yeek's fast movement speed allow it to go towards the various ciphers really quickly and the Dorito timer made it so the survivors had to wait before being able to decode again. In tourney, we've seen patient Ivies go from 4 people at 1 cipher remaining to 4 people eliminated in that same match because of her cipher control. With these changes, she will still be a cipher controlling monster in the early game, but far weaker in the mid game once she has a survivor eliminated. Right now, Ivy has a 45-second cooldown on leeches, which is technically 20 seconds because Doritos last for 20 seconds and take 5 seconds to eat. With the changes, it has been increased to 30 seconds, which is a giant leap compared to how it is currently. While I don't think she'll be off meta with these changes, I expect to see a lot less Ivy being played after the changes, only being played by people who can still play her to her fullest. And that's all the major nerfed characters in this patch, overall good efforts to balance the game more. I do think one got it worse than the other, but oh well. With the nerfs out of the way, we can now get onto the buffs made in this patch. Like usual, I will go over the ones that don't have much that needs to be said about them and save the biggest ones for later. Starting with Acrobat, his buff is more so a bug fix rather than it is an actual buff. Whenever Acrobat works on a cipher and it loses progress in any way, Acrobat will also lose progress on his white ball charge. This is because Acrobat's white ball is tied to progress rather than decoding time, so losing progress means you lose white ball progress too. All the changes did was make it so white ball is tied to decoding time now, so you won't have progress lost anymore on your balls. Next is Composer who, again, didn't really get a buff and more so got a quality of life change. If you max out the decoding buff on Composer, you will be given the option to turn on auto combo. Doing so will cause the decoding minigame to do itself, allowing you to focus on the map without worrying about the minigame. It's just quality of life, so there's not much to talk about. It's a good change, but I don't think this fixed the core issues of Composer, that being his kiting and calibrations. Composer's cooldowns are just too long for an ability that really doesn't provide much help unless you use it alongside Palette Booster to stay ahead of the hunter. Composer could also theoretically decode slower than other decoders because he cannot hit perfect calibrations and, thus, decode slower. Despite that, I still think this was a solid change made to him and will make playing him a lot less annoying. Cowboys up next too, shocker, didn't really get buffed and more so got a quality of life change. Essentially, Cowboy can now turn off carry animations on his screen, meaning the hunter will always do the normal balloons animation. However, unlike Composer or Acrobat's changes, I think this change is really good for Cowboy. One of the biggest problems Cowboy had for a while now is the fact that he gets countered a lot by carry animations. The worst of these carry animations being the ones that drag the survivor on the floor. These carry animations are infamous because they make it so any form of elevation kills any potential of Cowboy trying to get a lasso save. If a hunter carries the survivor into basement with a dragging animation, you would have no chance of saving them versus if they were on balloons. With this change, it allows Cowboy to finally be able to save survivors without worrying if the hunter has a certain carry animation. Not much more I can really say, good change all around. Now we move on to characters who actually got a buff rather than a change. We have Explorer's Energy Reserves buff. Now Explorer only has to stand still for 6 seconds rather than 10 seconds to get energy reserves, which the boost is now 25% for 4 seconds rather than 10% for 5 seconds. I'll be honest, energy reserves is not the most groundbreaking trait in the world, but this is still a good change. It allows you to gain the buff faster and makes you move faster. It's not practical in chase or anything of the sort, but it helps. However, now we are getting into the changes. I have a lot to talk about, starting with the Fire Investigator buffs. The first change they did was decrease the time it takes to bounce off an airbag from 0.3 seconds to 0.2 seconds. Right off the bat, this is an amazing change and will allow you to gain distance with the hunter a bit faster. However, one thing I notice people are missing out is the fact that this buff doesn't just affect Fire Investigator. This means other survivors can also bounce off these airbags faster now, which really buffs his support game. Another thing that really buffs his support is the new range he can throw airbags. The maximum throw distance off airbags got increased as well from 8.43 meters to 12.65 meters for the record. Here's what the throw range of airbags is currently, and this is what it'll look like with the changes. These two changes are amazing because they buff the one aspect of his kit I felt needed addressing. If you've known me since Florian's release, you'd know that I don't think he needed buffs of any kind except for buffs around his support. The range of the airbags throw hindered a bit of what you could do with airbags, and I felt those were the only changes necessary to make him amazing. Now, they've addressed the support aspect of Fire Investigator in more than one way, and I could not be happier with these two changes. I'm also happy they didn't take the easy way out and gave him the ability to pick up items after losing his 2 airbags. I'm a big fan of abilities where you need to be smart about your item usage, and I feel allowing him to pick up items would make his smart design feel less fun. So yeah, amazing changes all around. The final change just decreases the maximum decoding gain from 15% to 10%, but changes the debuff from 10% to 5%. All this really means is that he decodes faster in base speed, which is really good, I suppose. Overall, I'm really happy with the Florian changes. I can't wait to play him more when they come out. However, before I move on, I wanted to talk about an issue that's currently affecting Fire Investigator that I noticed. Whenever I would play Fire Investigator against certain hunters, I noticed that they aren't affected by the airbag's increased wall hit time passive when they pop airbags. I noticed this on Percy at first, specifically when he wasn't charged at 50 energy. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off because Percy had a 0.8 second wall hit time. However, then I noticed it on hunters like Hell, Ember and Anne, hunters with much longer wall hit times who are also unaffected. In fact, they look to recover faster anytime they pop airbags rather than be slowed down. And before you say that just shows how bad the increased wall hit passive is, I've noticed it working on other hunters like Ithaca or Bonbon. These two hunters still suffer from the longer airbag recovery time buff, so the fact that there are hunters in the game who don't is really baffling. I wanted to bring this up in hopes NetEase would go and fix this bug. I feel this is the reason the airbags don't feel as impactful, and it would help judge if the time needs to be buffed or not. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say on this bug, and I'm not sure if I'll find a way to add this in a later video, so let's move on now. Postman got some great changes made to him, which I feel confident will be enough to see him played a bit more. Whenever Postman fails to deliver a letter to a survivor, it doesn't force the letter delivery ability to go on cooldown anymore. I'm sure we've been in that position where we send Wick out to help the kiter, only for them to die immediately and put Wick on cooldown. It's incredibly annoying and it makes going to help the kiter a risk. Now, you can send letters without worrying about the cooldown system, since they won't be put on cooldown if they go down. And in the case the letter does fail, it just means you can send a decoding letter to a teammate or a rescue letter to your rescuer. There's a lot more options Postman can do with this buff, so it's a really good change all around. However, I feel this change is overshadowed by the changes made to Wick's bite, which is fair because the bite change is insane. Rather than Wick just slowing down the hunter for 5 seconds when bitten, Wick now stuns the hunter for 1 second before they suffer the slowdown for 2.5 seconds. Yes, Wick is now a stunning tool and this change alone makes Wick insane. This means all the things you can do with stuns, such as balloon rescue, stop teleports, and various other things also apply to this bite. This gives Postman so much more versatility, since he essentially has a ranged stun. He also has the same cooldowns as current Postman, so missing the stun is not as punishing and you'll always get your stun before prisoner. In fact, I think this stun just makes Postman a better prisoner in terms of supporting the team, since he can use the stun from a distance while also providing other helpful buffs for the team. One aspect of this buff I feel people gloss over is the fact that Postman is not forced into an animation whenever the hunter is affected by it. Since the animation plays while Wick isn't immediately rushing for the hunter and Wick can return to Postman and bite, it means there will be opportunities where you can still interact. With Prisoner and Enchantress, their stuns put them in an animation, making it so they have to wait it out before they can interact with the map. With Postman, you have the freedom to rescue or interact with the map without the fear of being terror shocked thanks to the stun. While Prisoner will definitely be better for helping teammates decode faster, I do think there is now a place for Postman in teams now. We'll have to see how this buff affects Postman's ranking and see from there. Finally, we move on to Ember, who got his own array of changes. Okay, let's talk about Ember real quick. Ever since Ember's first buff back in 2018 to now, I've been noticing that the devs just don't know what they want Ember to be. From 2018 to now, I've seen them make very strange and questionable changes towards their flagship hunter. These changes stem from nerfs, backtracking on ideas, and changes that feel very unfulfilled. These changes, in particular, feel like they were so close to being good, but the devs played it too safe and ultimately feels bad. Starting with the minor changes, his attack judgment has been optimized so he wouldn't hit as many walls as he would now. They also decreased the backswing of Ember's normal and charged attack by 0.2 seconds. These are solid changes to his design and make him feel a lot smoother to play. However, then we get to the more controversial aspect of these changes, starting with the nerf made to Ember. Every survivor stun in this game will give Ember 60% less Ember than he would right now. To compensate for this, they increased his starting Ember from 50% to 80% and made it so he generates Embers, even if he isn't in chase. This would be a really good change that would compensate for the reduced Embers off stun, so what's the issue? Well, this would be a good compensation if the numbers were greater than 0.2 Ember per second. This meant that you would need to wait 5 seconds to gain 1% of your Ember or 25 seconds to get 10% of an Ember. This is what I mean by the devs just not knowing what to do with Leo, and it's been a trend I've been noticing ever since his first buff. A lot of people seem to attribute this direction with the fact that Leo is a starting character and they don't want starting characters to be strong. However, what causes this argument to fall flat is the fact that we have various starting survivors who have received game-changing buffs and even a few are in the meta right now. Gardener and Lawyer are characters you get for starting Identity V and they're currently considered strong survivors in this current meta. Even Doctor and Lucky Guy, weaker characters than Lawyer and Gardener, are still played and can perform well in this current day meta. So with this in mind, why are they so scared about buffing Ember or giving him any meaningful changes? Some would argue new players to be the answer, but I feel like that's just a cheap cop-out in order to prevent a starting character from at least being mid. There are ways to make Ember stronger than he is right now, but not strong enough to be oppressive to the newer players. I might make a video about Ember in the future because there's so much I want to talk about, but for now, I think it's best to say I'm mixed on these changes. Like I said, these changes were so close to being perfect and could have really helped Ember if they had just taken a bit of a risk. However, they did not commit to it and it's sad to see. Hello everyone, JesterGio here. Before we wrap up this video, I wanted to mention a few things. I made this script on Monday when the hurricane hit my house and knocked out all my power. As of writing this, my power is still down and that kinda sucks. However, NetEase changed a few things that were in the test server. Not only that, but I've looked at Leo's changes a lot more critically and now can confidently say that they're a lot better than I and a lot of Ember mains gave it credit. So let's briefly go over the changes before wrapping up. Starting with Hell Ember, I've come around on a lot of his changes, especially after learning what the nerf meant. Surprise surprise, NetEase worded the nerf wrong and it doesn't decrease rage from stuns by 60%. Rather, what it did was give you 60% of the original rage, so it's actually a 40% decrease. They toned this down to 80% now, meaning rage from stuns give you 20% less now. This turns the stun nerf from an incredibly crippling change to a negligible nerf to these changes. In fact, looking at the Hell Ember adjustments more critically after the stun realization, I do think Hell Ember got a massive buff from this change. The Cypher Rage and Palette Rage still exist, it's just the character Stun Rage that's been nerfed, and only by 20%. Plus, the 80% starting rage is actually a massive buff. It only takes Hell Ember 10 seconds to gain his starting Ember, which is huge for his early game. Plus, they're adjusting his hitboxes to make it less likely to get wall hits and are reducing his backswing. If this hurts Red Puppet Trick, this'll be a nerf. If not, these are massive Leo changes that won't make him meta, but will definitely make him far better to play as. Next is Postman, who got a slight nerf from the test server to now. Put simply, they made it so Wick cannot stun the hunter while they are in the balloons animation. This means that, like Anti and Cowboy, you need to wait until the animation is finished before you're allowed to balloon rescue. This is a nerf to his harassment game, although a fair one. Compared to Prisoner and Enchantress, he has a far safer stun because it was a ranged stun. You also got it back faster when you landed and it slows the hunter down on top of it, so the change is fair. Wick's bite still has its other capabilities to it as well, so this change doesn't bother me. Next is Fire Investigator, who got a few tweaks to his airbags in compensation to the range buff. First, they reduced the minimum distance of the airbag throw. This just means if you hold down the button and don't increase or decrease the range manually, the starting range is reduced. I'll be honest, I see this more as a kiting buff than a nerf to his skill. It's really easy to go to the max range with the airbags, it's just the differing ranges can hurt the kiting potential. With the new minimum range, it means Fire Investigator can more quickly put down an airbag without worrying about it being too far or too close and bounce off the airbag quickly. Next is the airbag launch time, which got a slight nerf. Now, the airbags will take a bit longer to fully deploy depending on how far you throw the airbags. Looking at the comparisons between the two videos, I just don't think this change will be very impactful. For kiting situations, you don't need to send your airbags far at all, since you want to reach them quickly. All this'll really affect is how you go about supporting, since the added time will affect long-range support. Otherwise, I don't think this change is that big of a deal, especially since the time is negligible. Finally, the airbag bounce has been made slightly longer. If I could describe this change to you, I would say this is the equivalent to what they did to Toy Merchant's catapults. When they changed Annie, they made it so she can drop her catapults in 1 second rather than 2. However, they also added a 1-second buffer before you can actually use it, making it so the total time still requires you to wait 2 seconds before using the catapult, even if the time is reduced. It's essentially the same thing here, they removed 0.1 second from the startup and added an additional 0.1 second to the actual bounce. There's really not much to say on this, I doubt this'll hurt Florian at all. All the other changes remain the same, so these are very harmless tweaks overall. Finally, Explorer got a minor adjustment to energy reserves, however this minor adjustment turned it from mid to insane. The change is that energy reserves now charges even if you're on chair. So when you get rescued, you will have a 25% speed boost for 4 seconds. I can understand how that doesn't sound all that noteworthy, but you need to remember that this is a speed boost you will always have anytime you get off chair. Energy reserves doesn't have a cooldown to it, so you don't have to wait an additional 10 to 50 seconds to get the speed boost again, unlike Composer or Cheerleader. This can also be combined with Companion Effect to where you gain a 48% speed boost when you get off chair. This is amazing for rebounding and allows you to quickly get away from even the worst chairs. The hunter can't really afford to put you on the chairs closest to the basement stairs anymore because you will be out of basement if they do so. It'll allow you to potentially get further away from bad chair locations when you have tied, make it to loops other survivors cannot make without their items. Or even potentially lose the hunter if they accidentally got backdoor rescued. Energy reserves was never really an amazing trait in my opinion, but these changes definitely give it far better usability. Combine that with the fact that Explorer is already a hard survivor to locate and you have a really annoying survivor to face off in most situations. And that's all on the changes they made to the test server, really good changes all around. With that said, I think it's time we finally wrap up this video now.
Hold it!
Just kidding, you thought we were done with talking about the changes. Well, too bad because, as I was gathering the test server footage for this video, I realized I forgot to talk about a character. To be fair, I tend to forget this character exists and I'm sure you guys forgot as well. And it's not like he got a tiny buff as well, he got a pretty sizable buff and I still forgot him. So let's go over the character I forgot first before finally wrapping things up, Weeping Clown. First, they reduced the cooldown of Rocket from 20 seconds to 16 seconds, allowing you to access Rocket faster with each use. Next, they made it so your Rocket speed when carrying another survivor has been changed to where it is much faster than using it alone before slowing down. Interestingly enough, I noticed that Weeping Clown's Rocket speed when alone is already increased, so I don't know if that's intentional or if that's a bug. If it's not a bug, then this is a pretty big containment and support buff for Weeping Clown. Finally, they reduced the startup animation Weeping Clown does when he pulls out the rocket. This means you will not be in the animation for long and will be able to use Rocket early. These are extremely good Weeping Clown buffs that buff every aspect of his kit and his role. The speed buff makes using the rocket to help your teammates really good as it allows you to get them out of a bad situation or away from the hunter way sooner. It can also be used to help teammates reach important locations or escape routes with less of a chance of the hunter shutting you down, so it's really good for support. The startup, speed, and cooldown changes also make Rocket a really good kiting option now. The problem with Rocket right now is the long startup alongside the cooldown and slower speed of it compared to Forward, Wildling, or even Florian. These changes will make him a really decent transitional kiter and a really good character to counter certain hunter abilities. Finally, the faster startup will be good for helping Weeping Clown harass a bit more. It's not as impactful as the other changes, but I still think it'll definitely help you pull Rocket out faster and potentially stun the hunter before finishing the balloon animation or before dropping the survivor. Overall, these were some much needed buffs towards Weeping Clown and I definitely will check him out when they come to live. Alright, that should be everything. I'm confident I didn't miss anything, so let's finally wrap things up now. And that about concludes the changes that will be made at the end of Season 32. Looking at the collection as a whole, I can confidently say that these are some really good changes that are coming to the game. Some could have been hit more than others, but that's always how patches like these goes. Nevertheless, I am really happy in the direction this game is going and I hope this video can show it. With that said, that's all the time I have for today. Sorry for holding off on this video for so long, know that I didn't want to hold this video back on purpose. There will be a lot of discuss videos happening with some of the characters mentioned in this patch, so look forward to that. Until then, thank you so much for watching and I will see all of you next time.